Outsmarting others begins not with strategies directed at them, but with a disciplined mastery of yourself. True power lies in internal control of your thoughts, emotions, impulses, and habits. Most people operate reactively, driven by short-term emotions and external validation, but those who consistently dominate social, intellectual, or competitive spaces are those who command themselves first. Neuroscience shows us that the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought and planning, can be trained like a muscle. When you engage in routines that promote mental clarity, such as consistent sleep, mindfulness practices, and daily planning, you're strengthening your cognitive control and emotional stability. These are not soft skills. They are biological reinforcements that shape your perception, response, time, and behavioral consistency. By mastering your internal state, you essentially place yourself in a position where external circumstances become far less destabilizing. When others are overwhelmed by uncertainty, emotional noise, or mental fatigue, you remain grounded. This gives you the edge to observe, adapt, and act with precision. Moreover, this inner discipline also creates an identity that commands respect without the need for dominance. People naturally gravitate toward those who appear composed, measured, and unaffected by chaos. From a social neuroscience perspective, humans are wired to seek cues of stability and leadership, especially in uncertain environments. By embodying these traits, stillness, control, direction, you signal power without needing to declare it. Most social battles are not won through arguments or aggression, but through consistent demonstration of competence, restraint, and timing. You don't need to rush to prove yourself. Those who master themselves can afford to wait, because time, when combined with clarity and control, becomes a strategic tool. They observe longer, respond smarter, and move when outcomes are most predictable. Self-dominance also breeds confidence. Not the loud, performative kind, but a deeper, neurologically rooted calmness that comes from knowing you are in charge of your internal world. This internal certainty rewires your brain's response to threat and opportunity. Instead of reacting to every stimulus, an insult, a challenge, a surprise, you learn to filter information through reasoned thought. Over time, this develops into a form of cognitive sovereignty. You don't give your energy away to distractions. You don't chase people, impressions, or temporary rewards. And as a result, your decisions become sharper, your influence becomes more natural, and your position becomes harder to shake. This level of discipline is rare precisely because it requires the opposite of what society teaches. Don't chase approval. Don't react emotionally. Don't act without intention. But once you commit to the path of self-dominance, you begin to recognize its ripple effect. People treat you differently, opportunities emerge more organically, and you find yourself playing the long game while others burn out on short-term moves. Outsmarting others then is not a matter of tricks or manipulation. It is the natural consequence of mastering the most difficult battlefield of all, your own mind. And in mastering yourself, you no longer need to seek power. It quietly begins to orbit you. Emotional regulation is one of the most underestimated forms of intelligence, yet it's the cornerstone of strategic thinking and influence. In high-stakes environments and personal relationships, and especially in competitive scenarios, it is not the loudest or the most reactive who wins. It's the one who remains calm, composed, and emotionally deliberate. The human brain is wired to prioritize emotional input. The amygdala processes threats and emotionally charged stimuli far faster than the rational prefrontal cortex. This is why when people feel insulted, threatened, or anxious, they react impulsively. But this same biological system can be reconditioned. Through training, you can decouple the stimulus from the reaction. That means you can encounter provocation, discomfort, or manipulation and still retain your decision-making capacity. When you learn to control your emotional state, you gain an invisible upper hand. Most people are unaware of how predictable they become when they are emotionally triggered. They raise their voices, change their posture, reveal their insecurities through their words and actions. But a person trained in emotional regulation becomes unreadable. Their silence, their stillness, and their composure create discomfort in others because it disrupts expectations. The average person anticipates emotional responses, and when they're met with calm, it breaks the loop of control they're used to exerting. This doesn't just apply to arguments or conflict. It's present in negotiations, interviews, debates, even casual conversations where power dynamics are at play. From a physiological standpoint, emotional regulation is a trainable skill. Breathwork, cold exposure, meditation, and even journaling have measurable effects on your nervous system and stress response. These tools help shift the body from sympathetic or flight dominance into parasympathetic rest and digest control. When you're in a parasympathetic state, your brain operates with greater clarity, your body uses energy more efficiently, and your communication becomes more deliberate. This doesn't just improve how others perceive you. It transforms how you perceive situations. You become more objective, more strategic, and more observant of others' emotional tells. In practical terms, this means you don't just survive pressure. You shape it. You become the emotional anchor in every room you enter. While others spin into drama, fear, or urgency, you remain centered. That stability gives you control over timing, tone, and narrative. If someone tries to provoke you, their efforts lose momentum. If they expect a reactive answer, your pause creates discomfort. That discomfort gives you power. Emotional neutrality is not weakness. It's weaponized restraint. Furthermore, this emotional control allows you to influence without needing to dominate. When you're calm, people are drawn to you. They assume confidence. They project strength onto your behavior. And because you're not emotionally erratic, people begin to trust judgment, even when you haven't spoken much. That's influence without effort. And over time, that influence compounds. You become the person people rely on, the one who's consulted during crisis, the one whose opinion shapes decisions. Not because you forced your way in, but because your emotional discipline built a reputation too strong to ignore. Outsmarting others, in this context, doesn't mean tricking them. It means outlasting their emotional volatility with your own clarity. It means controlling the emotional temperature of a conversation and using your awareness to shape outcomes while others are still trying to steady themselves. Emotional regulation is not just about staying calm. It's about commanding the room without raising your voice. Outsmarting others is not about memorizing facts or having the highest IQ. It's about developing the ability to recognize, interpret, and act on patterns. The human brain is a pattern-seeking organ. From childhood, we begin to make sense of the world through repeated experiences, creating internal templates for people, situations, and consequences. But what separates the truly strategic mind from the average one is not the ability to see what's obvious. It's the ability to observe what others overlook, to notice trends before they become clear, and to draw accurate conclusions from subtle behavioral, verbal, and environmental cues. Pattern recognition is a cognitive amplifier. When you enhance your skill in this area, every conversation, negotiation, or encounter becomes a chance to read ahead, to predict rather than react. In real-world settings, this can look like understanding social hierarchies within seconds of entering a room. It means noticing who talks the most, who talks the least, who listens, who defers, and who subtly dominates. These micro-observations form patterns of power, influence, and insecurity. They allow you to assess dynamics without needing to ask questions. And once you understand the structure, you can position yourself strategically without force. Pattern recognition also applies to decision-making. Most people repeat the same mistakes, follow the same emotional cycles, and communicate in predictable loops. If you listen closely and observe repeatedly, you'll begin to see how often people reveal their motives without intending to. They show their fears, their desires, their thresholds for stress, all in how they behave over time. From a neurological standpoint, the more we expose ourselves to diverse experiences and consciously reflect on them, the more refined our pattern recognition becomes. Neuroplasticity ensures that the brain builds stronger pathways around frequently used cognitive processes. That means when you intentionally reflect on conversations, outcomes, and human behaviors, your brain begins to automate these analyses. You don't have to force insights. They become intuitive. This is why high-level strategists and leaders often seem like they just know things. It's not instinct. It's refined cognition born from exposure and reflection. Moreover, pattern recognition also allows you to anticipate others' actions. In competitive settings, this is invaluable. If you know how someone tends to respond under pressure, you can predict their next move. If you've seen how people defend their ego when threatened, you can set traps without confrontation. You can mirror language to build trust or break rhythm to disrupt emotional flow. Recognizing and using behavioral patterns isn't manipulation. It's awareness. It's knowing that human behavior is far more predictable than people like to admit, and that most people are too distracted to see it. The mastery of patterns also allows you to conserve energy. You no longer waste time on people who show early signs of unreliability. You avoid conversations that are designed to bait you emotionally. You stop trying to fix situations that follow a destructive loop. In doing so, you make smarter decisions faster, which in turn reinforces your advantage. Outsmarting someone doesn't require confrontation. It often means being 5 moves ahead simply because you've seen this story before. Ultimately, sharpening your ability to read patterns is not about superiority. It's about efficiency and foresight. It's about positioning yourself in the right place at the right time with the right knowledge. And when you can do that repeatedly with minimal emotional disturbance, people begin to wonder how you always seem to win, how you always seem to know. But it isn't luck and it isn't magic. It's a cognitive edge built on pattern awareness. And any arena where power, influence, or clarity matters, that edge becomes your most sustainable advantage. Controlled exposure to stress is not just a method of becoming mentally tougher. It's a rewiring mechanism for the brain and nervous system. When you deliberately place yourself in uncomfortable or high-pressure situations and learn to stay present through them, you're training your physiology to adapt instead of panic. The key to this lies in how the brain processes stress. Under normal conditions, the amygdala triggers a fight or flight response to protect you. However, repeated intentional exposure to controlled stress allows the prefrontal cortex to step in, asserting logical control over the emotional response. This reshapes how you experience adversity. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once induced fear becomes familiar. Over time, this changes your entire identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who avoids pressure and instead become someone who commands it. In leadership, social dynamics, and any environment where influence is earned, people naturally look to those who remain composed under strain. Most individuals crumble when unexpected stress arises. They rush decisions, shift blame, react emotionally. But someone who has built the neural and emotional strength to remain calm gains instant authority. This doesn't come from theory. It comes from real-time training. It might look like engaging in hard conversations instead of avoiding them, putting yourself in unfamiliar environments regularly, or taking on responsibilities that stretch your current capabilities. The brain, when exposed to new levels of discomfort in a controlled way, starts creating new wiring, more resilience, faster recovery, increased clarity. This kind of exposure doesn't just build tolerance. It builds a feedback system. You start learning what kinds of stress teach you the most. You begin to calibrate your responses, regulate your breathing, control your thoughts in real time. These are deeply biological functions driven by heart rate variability, cortisol rhythms, and neurofeedback loops. The more control you develop here, the more capable you are of navigating situations others avoid entirely. You stop flinching at challenge. You stop needing comfort to perform. And most importantly, you become immune to being manipulated through fear, urgency, or emotional volatility because you felt it all before and remained standing. Powerful people are not necessarily the smartest or most talented. More often, they are simply the most stress resilient. They are the ones who do not get overwhelmed in chaos, who can delay gratification in pursuit of long-term advantage, and who stay rational when emotions run high. This quality creates a gravitational pull. Others begin to rely on your energy. They defer to your judgment not because you asked, but because you've demonstrated mastery where most people panic. The truth is, everyone wants to be led by someone who stays calm when it matters most. Additionally, when you train under stress, you also reduce your dependency on ideal conditions. Most people can only perform when they're comfortable, but comfort is rare in high-level environments. Negotiations, public decisions, crises, or unpredictable social encounters. If you've taught yourself to operate at full capacity despite discomfort, you no longer fear volatility. You use it for sunlight. You thrive where others tighten up. You lean in while they pull back. This gives you leverage in almost any scenario because you've developed an internal system that doesn't need permission from your environment to stay composed. Ultimately, Outsmarting others doesn't always mean outthinking them. Often it means outlasting them. And the ability to outlast, to remain stable, clear, and deliberate in moments of intensity comes from deliberate exposure to pressure. When you've taught your body and mind that discomfort isn't danger, you become impossible to shake. You become the one who takes control not by force, but by presence. And in that stillness under fire, real power begins to emerge. The principle of leveraging reciprocity without emotional debt is a profound yet often misunderstood strategy for building influence. Humans are hardwired for reciprocal behavior. It's a deeply embedded social instinct. When someone gives us something of value, whether tangible or emotional, we feel compelled to return the favor. This reaction is not just social equip, it's neurochemical. Acts of generosity stimulate dopamine and oxytocin by creating a sense of connection and obligation. But those who understand this instinct and learn to give strategically without attachment create an asymmetry of influence. They remain in control because they are not by emotional expectation, while others unconsciously place themselves in a psychological debt cycle, giving first, offering insights, help, or guidance, signals strength, abundance, and confidence. Most people hesitate to give unless there's a guaranteed return, but that hesitation reflects scarcity and fear. When you offer value freely and without visible need for repayment, people perceive you as powerful. It communicates that you are not dependent on their validation or response. This self-containment immediately increases your perceived status. Over time, this builds a kind of invisible leverage. Others begin to seek your input, defer to your opinions, and feel emotionally and socially compelled to include you in decisions, opportunities, or inner circles. This kind of influence becomes exponentially more powerful when it's paired with emotional detachment. Most people unconsciously attach their identity to their good deeds. They want acknowledgement, loyalty, or at least a thank you. When that doesn't happen, they feel resentment, which weakens their position. But if you give outing recognition, your energy remains clean. You're not entangled in the emotional fallout of whether or not someone responded the way you hoped. You are in control not only of the act, but of the outcome. And over time, people notice, they respect it even if they don't understand it consciously. They trust your leadership because it is unburdened by neediness or emotional volatility. From a behavioral standpoint, this strategy is about consistency and timing. You don't give randomly. You observe where help is needed, where someone is struggling or stuck, and you offer what's relevant and specific. This kind of generosity feels intentional, not performative. And once you've planted that seed, you don't rush to harvest it. You allow reciprocity to unfold on its own timeline. People will remember who helped them when others didn't. They will seek your counsel when the stakes are high, not because you demanded it, but because your earlier actions earned it. Furthermore, strategic giving creates a reputation. Over time, your name becomes associated with clarity, insight, or reliability. You become someone people mention in rooms you've never entered. And once that reputation takes root, it works for you even when you're silent. It opens doors, softens resistance, and accelerates trust. All of this happens without needing to manipulate or pressure anyone. It's organic influence built on grounded action. The most effective leaders and strategists often operate from this exact principle. They give value up front without drama, and they walk away without attachment. Their power lies in their ability to contribute meaningfully without losing emotional control. They understand that giving is not about sacrifice. It's about positioning, and when you master this approach, you no longer chase opportunity, you create it. You don't force loyalty, you inspire it. Outsmarting others, in this sense, is about understanding a fundamental human truthing. People are far more likely to follow someone who gives without needing any return than someone who demands attention or reward. Influence isn't about what you take, it's about what you give and how quietly you do it. Silence and mystery are among the most underrated yet profoundly powerful tools for gaining psychological and social advantage. In a world driven by noise, oversharing, and constant self-promotion, those who speak less and reveal less automatically command more attention and respect. The human brain is wired to seek patterns, predict outcomes, and fill in gaps. When someone withholds information or remains emotionally neutral, it creates cognitive tension in the observer. This is not discomfort for its own sake. It's influenced through restraint. People become preoccupied with trying to figure you out. And in that process, they attribute more depth, intelligence, and authority to you than may even be evident. The less you reveal, the more others project. From a neurological standpoint, this effect is rooted in uncertainty. When people can't fully interpret your intentions, they remain mentally engaged with you. This state of focused attention is cognitively taxing for them and advantageous for you. You become a pattern they can't solve, a question they keep returning to. Silence disrupts expectations. Most people are used to verbal affirmation, emotional displays, and quick reactions. When you respond with stillness, a pause, or minimal words, it destabilizes the rhythm of interaction. That break in predictability increases your perceived control of the situation. You are not reacting. You are choosing. And that alone communicates power. Mystery also changes how people perceive time and attention. If you're always available, always explaining, always filling space, your presence becomes common, expected, and eventually ignored. But when you limit access, when you speak only when necessary or share insight sparingly, your communication gains weight. Others listen more closely, remember your words longer, and adjust their behavior around you. It's not about being cold or distant. It's about intentional scarcity. Humans value what is rare. When you create an air of unpredictability, others naturally elevate your status in their internal hierarchy. This tactic isn't manipulation. It's discipline. Most people feel compelled to speak in order to fill silence, to justify themselves or to avoid discomfort. But silence is not emptiness. It's space. And in that space, power grows. Learning to withhold your thoughts, emotions, or plans until the right moment is a form of strategic patience. It means you are not a slave to impulse. You control the narrative by choosing when to speak and when to remain quiet. This is especially effective in conflict, negotiation, and leadership. A pause before a response creates pressure. A slow reply signals thoughtfulness. An unrevealed opinion creates anticipation. Mystery also protects your leverage. When others don't know what you want, what you're planning, or what you care about most, they cannot easily manipulate or undermine you. Transparency is often portrayed as a virtue, but in competitive or high-stakes environments, it can be a vulnerability. The more others know about your motives and limits, the easier it is for them to disrupt your strategy. But when you maintain mystery, you force others to show their cards first. You observe more than you're observed. You control more than you're controlled. This doesn't mean you disengage or isolate. It means you become deliberate. You listen deeply, observe quietly, and choose your words with precision. You don't explain what doesn't need explanation. You don't reveal your emotional state when it's not necessary. Over time, this creates an aura. People sense something about you they can't quite name. That intrigue becomes influence. And influence earned through mystery is more powerful than authority granted through noise. To outsmart others, you don't need to overpower them. You need to let them underestimate you, question you, wonder about you. While they're guessing, you're positioning. While they're talking, you're calculating. And when the time comes to act, your silence will have already done half the work.